welcome everyone to This Week in Svelte, episode 97. Unfortunately, as you might have seen from the thumbnail, Mati will not be able to join us also today. It's unfortunate. But we will do a bit of live coding, so don't worry. Stick around, because we will do a bit of live coding. So, let's jump right into it. And let's go with the changelog, which is quite a short one, to be fair. In Svelte 5.22.6, we have skip log if contains state, if only logging literals. So this is something that basically when you log something that contains state, so if I go to svelte.dev/playground, if I have some stateful variable, or assign state, and I try to console.log name, I think maybe it's not even doing it now, maybe just in dev. Yeah, in dev. So, as you can see, in dev, we are doing the console log of log if contains state, log name. And the reason why we do this is because when, especially this is true for proxies, let's say that this is a proxy and I have name word, for example. If you take a look at the log of this, you can see that we have a warning, which is console log state. Your console log contains state proxies. Consider using $inspect or state snapshot instead. And the reason for this is because when you log a proxy, the browser will actually show you the proxy. And the proxy that we are using in Svelte, the target is not actually exactly the thing that you have. And most importantly, the reference to the target is still the old object. So if you change this object, the target of the proxy will not be this very object. And so it could be confusing. We received some issue in the past about this. And so we decided to print a warning for this. And also at the same time, we also show this snapshot of the state. So by doing this, you are literally logging the right thing, basically. It's like, even if I change it, let me see if I can do it. Name.name is equal to Paolo, for example. If I take a look at the logged proxy, you can see that in the target, name is still word. I don't know if you can see it because it's very small, and unfortunately there is a bug in Arc, so I cannot change it. But you can see that the target of the proxy is detached from the actual stateful object. And so even if the name of the signal of the value is Paolo, in the target is still word. And so this was confusing to people. And so now we basically, if you console log in dev mode, we are adding this thing. Now, where the PR comes into place is that this is really not useful if you are just logging literals. So before the PR, even if you were just logging literals, we were still wrapping in the function call. And that's really not useful because we know that there can't be state if there are only literals. And so for the moment, it was an easy fix, an easy win to just remove it in case you are only logging literals. Let's switch to add close by property to HTML dialog attribute type. So yeah, basically there is this closed by property inside. If you have a dialog, you can see who closed the dialog. Actually, I think it's rather than who closed it, I think it's actually what will close the dialog. Let me see. HTML dialog element dot closed by. Let's see on MDN what they have to say. I think it's you can close Let me see if I can search closed by. There's no mention on MDN. Wow, I have no idea what these closed by. Maybe we can check out the PR. Yeah, okay, it's in the spec. Let's see. This is the HTML spec, by the way. The content attribute is enumerated attribute with the following keywords and state. So it's closed by any, close request, or click outside, close the dialog. Close request, it's only close request. And none, no user action automatically close the dialog. Okay, today I learned. So you can actually specify each one of these on the dialog itself to specify what should close the dialog. So if you a close request should be when you are submitting a form inside the dialog, or even not, the ESC key on desktop platform, the back button, the assistive technology, this missing gesture, a game controller back. Pretty cool. And so like it was just a typing issue. You could still use it, but Svelte was yelling at you. Fix null and warnings for local handlers. So when you were using handlers that were local, so there are, in general, handler in Svelte are delegated, which means that instead of adding an event listener for every single instead of adding an event listener for every single element, we just add a listener on top on the body, and we use bubbling to catch that handler. The point is, some event are just like they need to be local, so we can't use delegated element. And in those cases, if you were passing null as like the argument of the handler, it was throwing an error, while instead it should just ignore the handler. And so that's what this PR fixes it. We have another minor change: make value consistent between effect and their cleanup function. So this was actually the PR that I showed you last week. So we actually made this fix. So we shipped this fix. This could be a breaking change, so please, if we broke your code, let us know. But if you have a component now, let's say that you are doing something like let count is equal to $props. Actually, like shown, for example. And let's actually do something like let person is equal to this, and let's say that you're doing $effect, and in the return value of the effect, so on destroy, you want to console log person.name, for example. So in this situation, let's say that you have a long TypeScript and you want to have you want person should be an object with a name which is a string, right? So in this case, the types tells you that this cannot be undefined. So if you want to pass this person as a props of the component, inside here, you have to import the component from component of Svelte. You have to have the person, and you have to say name is Paolo, for example, like this, and then you have to do component, and you have to do person. Now, this is fine, but let's say that you can actually nullify component. So let's say that you do onClick is equal to person is equal to undefined. Undefined. Delete person. So now, since it could be undefined, you need to wrap it in an if, right? Otherwise, TypeScript itself will complain. So if person, and you do this like this. So the thing is, if you take a look at the JS output of this, you can see that person is just a stateful proxy inside here. And when you create the component, is just creating, like calling this component function. And then the props are actually just a getter. So this is actually returning, like it's a live representation of the value because it's within a closure, right? And so what happens is that the moment you switch person to undefined, this component is unmounted, but person is already undefined. So when you go here and you try to access props person.name, you will actually access the old value, like the new value, the already undefined value. And in this case, it's very annoying because TypeScript is telling you that person is not undefinable, like it will always be defined. And so you're fine, and then it's breaking. And so the fix that we shipped is that now, whenever you access something within the return value here, it will be the old value, like the value you also read inside the effect. So in this case, if I delete person, you can see that despite the original value, like person being undefined, the value that I'm reading is actually the value that it was there when I executed the effect. So basically, if I do console.log person.name, you can see that it's the same value. So before, and I think I can actually show you, like if I do, if I go to Svelte 22, for example, I don't know if there is a 22.0. I think there is, yes. So if I go to Svelte 22, version 22, which is now fetching, it will get there, hopefully, yeah. So you can see that when it's loading, it's Paolo, and when I delete the person, it's throwing an error because it's trying to read from person, but person is now undefined. And so like this is technically a breaking change, so please let us know if we broke your code. I think like for the most people, and that's the reason why we decided to ship it as a fix. Oh, come on, why it's doing this? Where we decided to ship it as a fix. Okay. Is because like this is the most like you would expect something like this instead of accessing the newly updated value. So please let us know if we broke your code. And that's it for Svelte. Let's see if we have something new in SvelteKit. We actually have some pretty interesting stuff. So we can cache the reroute result. So reroute is a hook that you can add in SvelteKit that allow you to basically, if you have multiple routes, like for example, this is basically most useful for internationalization, because what you can do is, let's say that you have a page that is /en/something, and you want /for from like /et/qualcosa, for example. So you want to internationalize the URL too. Obviously, you don't want to write your roots in all the languages, or you don't want to write all your root with a parameter. And so the reroute hook would allow you to do is, let's say that you get it/something, it/qualcosa, you can say, okay, this root is actually mapping to this file, so to this other root. And so this basically allows you to have multiple roots, internationalized root, that points to the same plus page.svelte, basically. And another thing that also happened always for reroute is that now you also have access to fetch. So before, obviously, you could use the global fetch to fetch something, but the global fetch does not have a lot of stuff. Like, for example, if you are fetching from your own endpoint, since you are on the server, when you are on the server, the fetch that SvelteKit provide is actually just calling a function. So it's not actually calling, making an HTTP request, which is much better. And also, I think for the client side, if you use the SvelteKit fetch, it will inline the result inside. Like if you have like reroute can also be used in both in client and server, and so I think if you are fetching on the server, the result of the fetch will be inlined on the client, so that on the client it doesn't have to make that fetch request again. So it has some advantages, and now it's also available inside reroute. Let's go to other. We have some release for ESLint plugin Svelte. Baseball Yama is doing a lot of work for the version 3. There is add exclude runes option to the prefer const rule. Okay, so I think like excluded runes, this is probably an option to, so that if you have preferred const, you can probably, I'm wondering what this does. I want to see. Let's see. Open linking new tab. State also need to be excluded from the prefer const rule. Okay, so if state has object value, time tree user can reassign value.value even without us reassigning logic in discomposable. Therefore, it can be declared as both const and let. Okay. Okay. I don't fully grasp the reason for this. Like, probably we were getting more how can I say, more errors, and this allow you to not get an error if you do let value is equal to $sign state. I don't know why you should do that, but let's skip it. Check property key instead of value in valid prop names in Kit pages. Okay. Support Windows path delimiter. Oh gosh, Windows paths are the worst thing ever. Consistent selector style, not reporting class selector used in class directives. Okay, so if you are using a class directive, yeah, if you're using class directive, it was triggering this error in ESLint consistent selector style, even if it was not actually used, I guess. No navigation without base, ignoring fragment links. We also have some new changes in SV, the CLI. Insert the Tailwind CSS Vite plugin at the start of the plugin array. So this is something that is a bit annoying, because basically like plugins, Vite plugin, and specifically actually rollup plugins are order dependent. And so Tailwind actually changes the Svelte code directly before the Svelte code gets compiled by Vite plugin Svelte. And so it needs to be initially at the start of the plugin array, just to be safe. I think they actually figured out a way to, because you can actually set, like, specify that the transformation needs to happen before the rest of the transformation. But I don't know if something changed probably in Tailwind CSS. But regardless, it's always better to have it at the beginning. And by the way, this is also something that, like, if you are experiencing some problems with some Vite plugins, this could also be the case. And by the way, if you also are experiencing problem with some Vite plugin, I invite you to install Vite plugin Inspect that allow you to visualize the chain of transformation inside Vite. It's very cool, and if you're developing a Vite plugin, it's very, very good. Add keywords to library template. Okay, so right now, if you are creating a library for Svelte, like if you create a library, it will automatically add the keywords Svelte, SvelteKit, and stuff like that. This is kind of a tease for something that we are preparing for Svelte Society. So if you have a library for Svelte, make sure to add the Svelte tag in your library. That's it for the changelog. Let's go over some very quick announcement. You heard it. I know that you hate me because I'm constantly reminding you this, but Svelte Summit Spring 2025 is getting closer and closer, May 8 and May 9. And remember, there's also the workshop held by me, so I'm very eager to see you, but on the May 7th. So if you still have to buy tickets and you want to participate in this workshop, on May 7, you will be able to learn all about Svelte 4 to Svelte 5, like it's how to migrate. So yeah, please join us, and obviously, like, we have a bunch of speakers. If you want to sponsor the conference, please reach out. For the moment, Sentry is sponsoring. And obviously we have our lineup already announced. And speaking of which, that's the venue. Very cool. And speaking of which, if you want to know more about our like speakers, please go follow the Svelte Society. Let me zoom in a bit. The Svelte Society account on Blue Sky, because we are posting every day, I think, or closer to every day. We are posting some bio and some like details on the talks. And in general, like, it's a nice thing to be on Blue Sky and like follow Svelte Society. Okay, that was it even for the announcement. And now let's switch to the live coding part. And I want to like, what's the actual thing that we are gonna live code. So the thing that I want to live code, the reason why I want to show you this, I think I need to zoom in a bit more. The reason why I want to show you this is because I think that it's something that it's a bit tricky. It's a bit tricky. So let's say that you have, I don't know, let's say that you have let messages is equal to $state array, for example, and you want to add some messages. So let's add a form, and we have an input, name, message, and we have a button, send, like this, and we want on submit, we want to we want to prevent default, e.prevent default, like this, and we want to const form data is equal new form data e.target, and we want to get const message is equal to form data.get message. And then we want to do e.target.reset, just to be clear. And so let's do messages dot push message. So this is very simple, a very simple form. And let's say that you want to iterate over each messages as message, and we want to show each message, right? So we have a div, for example, with the message. Actually, let me switch this to a p tag like this, and we wrap all of this in a div. And the reason why we want to wrap all of this in a div is because we want for this to be scrollable. So we want to add a style tag, and inside the style tag we want to target the div and say that the max height is, I don't know, 300 pixel and overflow is auto. So this means that whenever you push something, you can write. At one point, it will stop being, let's actually say, I don't know, 150 pixel. At one point, it will start to scroll, right? And now, especially for applications like the AI, for example, like that is constantly writing to this thing, you want to have, like, first you want to have a way to scroll to the bottom of it, but you also want to like detect when you are at the bottom, because if you're not at the bottom, maybe you want to add a button to say, hey, scroll me to the bottom, right? And so what we can do is we can create a utility for this that like observe on an element, in this case the div, and can figure out if the user is scrolling to the bottom. And the reason why stick to bottom.svelte.js. Now, the reason why I started working on this is because someone opened a PR for this, and sorry, I was reading the comment from Thomas. Live code melt from scratch. I dare you. I double dare you. I will do it one day. Oh, I'm joking. Melt is a phenomenal way to write Svelte component, and it's absolutely out of my league. Especially, I mean, maybe not totally out of my league, but definitely out of my league for this week in Svelte. And if I were using Vim mode, I'd get this done in 5 seconds. I know Vim mode is objectively better if you're using Vim. Not for me. So regardless, let's say that we want stick to bottom.svelte.js, and the reason why, like, speaking of runes and Thomas. Thomas is also one of the maintainers of Runed, and Runed, if you don't know about it, you should, because it's basically a set of utility classes for runes. So runes actually allowed us to write a bunch of utility classes, and there are some pretty cool utility. For example, they recently released Resource, which is like a way to manage your async data, watch. You should never use it, in my opinion, but you do you. It's basically like an effect with a dependency array. Again, you should never use it, in my opinion. But they also have something like context to have a to use Svelte context in a more practical way, debounced and stuff like that. And we also for example, there is media query, should be media query. I don't know, maybe they removed it. But the point is, oh no, they removed it obviously because now it's native in Svelte. The point is, someone contributed to Runed and opened a PR to stick to bottom to something like this. But they were using effect.root and effect inside the constructor. And whenever I see effect inside a constructor and whenever I see effect.root, something is tingling in me. And so I said, you know what? I think this should actually use create subscriber. which is much better from Svelte reactivity. So, and this is also true for you. So whenever we are reaching for effect or effect.root, especially in a utility function, please think twice if create subscriber could be used. Sorry. And so I decided, okay, I want to rewrite this. And so let's actually try to do it again. So we can do export class, stick to bottom, right? And that's it. No, I'm joking. So the API that we want is something like this. Like you want a constructor. Now, the easy way would be to just accept a container. So container, and you act on this container. However, one of the problem with this is that if you're accessing a container, you probably need to do bind this inside Svelte. And so I want to show you. Let's say that I console.log container. Now inside my app.svelte, I'm gonna import stick to bottom from stick to bottom.svelte, right? And now, so what I want to do, I want to bind to this div, bind this to the div. I want to have let div is equal $state. Technically, you don't need state, but for the sake of it, let's keep it state, because in this case it will matter. So I want to do this div, and then I want to do const stick is equal new stick to bottom, and then I'm passing in the div. Now, as you can see, this is undefined. Now, why is this undefined? And this is a bit of a weird edge case, and unfortunately, like I would love to try to make this better in Svelte, but I've yet to figure out how. Because the problem is this code runs before this code. So if you take a look at the JS output, this code, stick to bottom, runs before this bind is. And so the problem is that you need access to this element, but this element will be undefined initially. So one solution could be for this to be a derived. And this is probably fine. Derived. Like this is probably fine. But I don't like it because the problem is you are recreating this every time div changes, and like maybe you want to keep some state inside. Also, it's not good. Like let's say that you are writing a library. It's not good that you have to force your user to use a derived. And like I see one, I guess, that say this should be an action. And I agree on some extent. There's still a problem, like, yeah, this should probably be, like, the problem here is that you don't want just to know if it's, you don't just want to know if it's, like, you want to have a stateful variable that tells you if it's at the bottom, right? So either you should accept something that the action should change, or you should probably do some weird stuff like create the action and also return the state, and then within the action you update the state. Like this could be a way, like, which is basically what Melt UI was doing in Svelte 4. But there's actually another way to do it, and that's what I explored. So you can actually do this and return the div. And so container now is actually container fn, like this is the function of the container. And so if you call the function, it will actually read the value. So that's one bit. So what we can do is we can say container fn is equal to $state. Actually, you don't even need to have container fn. Like this can just be a non-stateful variable. So I can do this dot container fn is equal to container fn. Oh, sorry. So I'm storing the reference to this function, and now I can say that container is equal to $derived dot by, and I can say that this is equal to this container fn. So what I'm doing is basically now I have the container, which is a derived, and since it is a derived, basically this will actually contain, whenever this div changes, it will update with the current value. And so I have a way to figure out this thing, right? Now, usually whenever you have to use create subscriber, you want to do it inside the constructor. So you want to create the subscribe inside the function, something like this, subscribe, and then you do this.subscribe is equal to create subscriber, and then you create you pass the function. And if you remember, basically inside here you have the update function, and whenever you call the update function, it will invoke, it will make the getter rerun. So now then you have the get to bottom, for example, which is the thing that we want to know. And inside here you do this dot subscribe. And so basically whenever this create subscriber, whenever you call this update function, this will rerun. So just to figure out, let's say that I have I is equal to 0, and I return this dot I plus plus, and let's say that I read this value. So I do stick dot to bottom. You can see that now is 0, and let's actually do this. So now it's 0, and let's say that what I do is const timeout is equal to, I want to write first the return value so that I can clean it up. Clear timeout, and then here I can just do set interval, and every second I call update. Now if I do this, you can see that every second this function basically rerun and I update, right? Now what's the problem here is that this function, this create subscriber, is actually being invoked immediately because we are reading to bottom immediately. And so when we read to bottom, the container is actually not yet initialized, which is a problem, and it's annoying to fix. So what you need to do here, and that's why basically I wanted to showcase this code, is that instead of creating the subscriber here, you should create the subscriber here in the to bottom function. So obviously this needs a bit of a gymnastic around, but the point is, instead of doing, let's also remove this thing. So what we want to do is obviously create a listener on scroll, right? And instead of returning I++ here, because we don't care about I, what we want to return is we want to return something about the container. And I'm gonna copy this because I can never remember it for the love of me. But basically you want to return something like this, which is a lot. So if this .container.scroll height, so if the scroll of the container minus the client height, so the height of the container, it's less than the scroll top, and you need to include a bit of a buffer, because otherwise it will never get actually to 0. It will get very close to 0, but not to 0. So let's say that you include a bit of a buffer. So if this is true, it means that we are at the bottom of our case. Now, when should we update? We should update whenever we scroll the container, right? So what we can do is, instead of creating it here, as I've said, we want to create it only if not this subscribe. So if we don't have a subscribe yet, we want to create the new subscriber. So the first time, and obviously, like, we also need to check and if this dot container, so if there is a container, and so this might be undefined, so we need to do this. But now, if we don't have a subscribe, and if we have a container, now we actually want to do. So we can do return on, which we can import from Svelte event on, and we want to return on, and we want to return this dot container scroll, I think, and then we want to do this. So whenever we scroll, we want to update. So if we do this, basically what we are doing is, if we don't have a subscribe and we have a container, we create this subscriber so that whenever this container scroll, we update this value. And so we can basically reread these values from the container again and figure out if it's true or not. So if we do this and we start adding this week in Svelte is very, very cool, is not working. Oh no, because it is working, but this is another problem, that like we never update when the value changes. So technically we should update whenever this container resides. So we should also add a resides observer, and we should also add a mutation observer, because every time something is added to the component might not reside, but you should still fix it. But now you can see that it's actually working. So when you scroll to the very bottom, this switches to true, and when you leave the bottom, this switches to false. And so this was a very interesting bit, and let me actually, I want to make sure that I'm not creating a bunch, because when I was, so this week in Svelte is awesome. Yeah, I'm not creating a bunch, because when I was creating this utility before, I actually fumbled a bit, and I was creating this a lot of times. So, I mean, this works, and it works fine. Like you can see, false switches to true. We are only creating subscribe one time, and we are actually accessing the container correctly. So I want to make this, I want to try to make this better in Svelte. I don't know if I can. And so that's why I think this is also a very interesting bit, because sometimes like I defaulted to create the subscriber inside the constructor, but sometimes you actually have to access it inside the setter itself. And obviously you need to guard it with this.subscribe and this.container. This actually has a bit of a bug yet, because if the container changes, this will not rerun. I mean, this will rerun, but this.subscribe will actually be already a thing, so it will not add the listener on the new element. So the other thing that you need to do to fix this is you also need to store the pref container somewhere, and when you create one subscriber, you also do this.pref container is equal to this container. And now, instead of just checking if the this.container, you want to check if this.container is different from this.pref container. So this works, and this week in Svelte is awesome. And so this is still working. But now let's say that we change the div, for example. So let's actually do this week in Svelte is awesome dot split like this, so that we can already get some value. And now let's say that we have, I don't know, let swap is equal to $state false, and here let's say that we do something like if swap, we want to do this, else, and if. And so if swap, we want to use the div, otherwise we want to use, I don't know, UL, for example. So, I mean, I don't know why you would do this, but let's say that you are doing it. So if swap, you want to have a div, otherwise you want to have the thing. And now let's say that we button swap, we do click is equal swap is equal to not swap, like this. And let's do HR here. So now when you swap, it should also work. Oh, it's not working. This is weird. Why is it not working? Okay. So if this dot container is different from previous container, this previous container is equal to this container. I'm just curious. Console log this dot container, this dot prev container. It's undefined, and I mean, let's do tag name. Yeah, we need to do this, and we need to do this. So let's swap. Yeah, so this should. Why is not resubscribing? Oh yeah, because this is not an and. This should be or. So if we don't have a subscribe, so if we don't have a subscribe and we have a container, yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, okay, that's it. So as you can see, like whenever we switch, we are also subscribing again. So we need to make sure that there is at least a container. And we also need to check that the container is different from the previous container. So, I mean, this works, and it has a bunch of... oh, I still need to add UL here, otherwise it will not work. So this is working. If we swap, it's still working. And we are subscribing and resubscribing again. So I just thought this was very, like, it's a very interesting challenge, a very interesting problem, because like by default, I would go with create subscriber inside the constructor, but in this specific case, you actually had to juggle a bit to use it inside the getter itself. So let me do stick to bottom. You will find this inside the description of the video. If you're watching from the future, you can just scroll down. And that's it for today. I hope that you learned something, and I hope that you enjoyed this week in Svelte. Sorry for the kind of a clickbait, because unfortunately there was no showcase today. But yep, that's it. And I'll see you guys next week. Peace out. Let me share the thing before. Bye, guys.